The whole world is watching what is happening in the UK, and the most influential figures are beginning to express their concern. In a recent conversation, Elon Musk and Joe Rogan openly addressed what they describe as the tyrannical state of the British government. They talked about how freedom of expression seems to be under threat, referring to cases of citizens arrested simply for what they post on social media. Joe Rogan pointed out that in the United Kingdom, thousands of people have received prison sentences for posts on networks, even when those posts were not directly linked to acts of violence. Musk and Rogan discussed how this situation evidences a worrying trend. While some countries are blatantly repressing freedom of expression, in the UK, this surveillance and control of opinions is taking shape in an increasingly subtle and constant way. One of the examples they mentioned is the fact that in the midst of a prison overcrowding crisis, the British government has released dangerous offenders, including some convicted of serious crimes, to make room for people imprisoned for comments on social media. Rogan commented that this type of decision is crazy and stressed the irony of seeing a country that boasts of democratic values apply such restrictive policies. He even compared the situation to Russia, stating that while in the United Kingdom the number of people arrested for thought crimes exceeds 4,000 cases, in Russia there are only a couple of hundred similar cases. This difference was shocking for both of them. Musk and Rogan noted how the UK appears to be moving toward a model of public opinion control and censorship reminiscent of other countries' social credit systems. Both raised concerns that this approach could lead to a culture of fear where self-censorship becomes the norm to avoid legal problems. The conversation between Musk and Rogan highlights the growing debate about the limits of free speech in the UK and the risk that this surveillance could erode fundamental rights. In addition to concerns about free speech, Musk and Rogan also reflected on the potential social consequences of such policies.
Easy for people to hear because they think about gun violence and gun problems and gun this and gun that, but that's the reality of the world that we live in, is that tyranny is possible and it exists other places, and it's slowly existing. It's slowly rearing its head in the UK. You're seeing, I think the number of people that have been arrested for just social media posts is bananas. It's in the thousands.
Yes, several thousand people have been given prison sentences in the UK for social media posts where there was no explicit link to actual violence, but they just said it encouraged violence. We're like, well, did anyone actually do anything as a result of that media post? Well, no. But they're just, and then they have a prison overcrowding situation in the UK, so they're quite literally releasing convicted pedophiles and putting people in jail for Facebook posts. That's an actual thing happening in Britain.
That is so wild.
Like you're like,
it's so wild that people can't see it.
What the fuck, is going on?
For them, the effect lies not only in limiting the voice of citizens, but in creating a climate of suspicion and self-censorship in which each person fears the repercussions of expressing their opinions. They pointed out that, in the long term, this repression could shape a society in which critical thinking and open debate are limited, weakening the very democratic structure that the country claims to defend. The United Kingdom has historically been characterized as a bastion of individual rights, and this situation marks a disturbing contrast. Musk expressed surprise that these restrictions are happening in a nation that was once seen as an example of freedom and justice. He said that by allowing authorities to increasingly monitor speech on social media, the British government seems willing to sacrifice the principles of freedom in exchange for a sense of order and security. Rogan added that the debate on the rights of expression and censorship should not be limited to issues of violence or security, but should include the possibility of criticizing the government and questioning public policies without fear of reprisals. He explained that although each country faces its own challenges, imposing limitations on personal expression on social networks only exacerbates distrust of institutions and fosters discontent among the population.
Just terrible government overreach. You're seeing it now in England where people are getting arrested for tweets.
Yeah.
Well, England, people talk about Soviet Russia, like how bad Russia is in terms of cracking down on thought police and cracking down on bad tweets and things like that. I think the statistics are, England I think there's something like 4,000 people have been arrested in England for thought crimes, where they've said things online that people find to be a hateful thing or a problematic thing. And I think it's only 200 in Russia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe in Russia they're too scared to do it at all.
Could be. Yeah. But the fact that they're comfortable with finding people who've said something that they disagree with and putting them in a fucking cage in England in 2024 is really wild.
Yeah.
Especially they're saying you can get arrested just for retweeting.
Musk also raised the issue of the double standard facing the UK, noting that certain individuals or entities are allowed to express politically correct ideas while punishing others for issuing opinions that are unpopular or contrary to the official narrative. This selective approach, they said, undermines the credibility of the system and deepens social division, generating an environment in which certain points of view are privileged while others are censored. Finally, both agreed that these kinds of restrictive policies in Western democracies can have a domino effect, inspiring other countries to adopt similar measures and normalizing state surveillance in the name of public safety. If this trend continues, they warned, future generations could grow up in an environment where censorship and control of information are commonplace, forgetting the values that were once fundamental in democratic society. The British farmers are up for grabs following the government's proposal to impose a new inheritance tax that would directly affect the transfer of farm property from one generation to the next. The concern runs deep, as many fear that these new measures could make it impossible for their children to inherit the land their families have worked for generations. Faced with this situation, some farmers have begun to organize a sewer sludge strike in an attempt to put pressure on the authorities and prevent the tax from moving forward. This type of strike would consist of refusing to treat sewage sludge, a key resource in the agricultural sector, which is commonly used as fertilizer due to its high effectiveness and reduced cost. By blocking the disposal of sludge, farmers would directly affect water companies which depend on them for the disposal of this waste. This act of protest, while extreme, demonstrates the frustration and anger that the proposed tax policy is generating in farming communities. In forums and social media, several farmers have discussed the possibility of coordinating this strike, hoping that the accumulation of waste and the high cost of disposing of it by other means will force the government to reconsider. For many, this tax represents an existential threat, as the associated high costs could leave heirs unable to maintain family property, putting at risk a way of life that has been passed down from generation to generation. Tom Bradshaw, president of the National Farmers Union, NFU, has confirmed that he has received numerous calls from farmers who fear that the new tax policies will end up being an unsustainable financial burden on their families. Some farmers have openly expressed that they feel they have gone from being the pride of the nation to being seen as a burden on their own families, a change they see as unfair and painful. From the government, a spokesman responded by assuring that the change in inheritance tax will affect a minority and that most farmers will still be able to pass their land to their children. However, this statement has done little to calm tempers among farmers, who see the change as a direct threat to their livelihoods and the survival of their family farms. Some farmers have pointed out that inheritance tax not only represents an economic burden, but also a lack of recognition of their contribution to the country,